The year is 1910. The German Empire and their Kaiser, Wilhelm II, want more land to spread their German ideals. They are ready for war with Russia and Austria-Hungary, two of the three nations that make up the Triple Alliance. The Russian Empire, under Tsar Nicholas II, wants revenge against Germany after they attacked them in an attempt to take over Ukraine. But most importantly, the British government seeks to end the threat posed by the Germans before it's too late. In order to do this, the British have gathered some of their finest soldiers under the command of General Sir Arthur Wellesley, who is considered one of Britain's greatest military minds. In retaliation, the Germans seek an alliance with Australia, who recently broke free from British control. However, the Australian people don't trust the Germans, as they think that the Germans can influence their government, making them a subject of a different European power, this time a much stricter and more powerful Germany. Meanwhile, the Russians are getting ready for war as well. They also have gathered together a powerful army, while at the same time preparing to defend themselves against any possible attack from Germany. For good measure, they have also made the decision to put their own fleet of warships built in anticipation of needing to fight off the Germans. These ships will be able to travel between the Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean without having to worry about being sunk by German submarines. By February of 1915, all of Europe has been thrown into chaos due to World War I. Both sides are pushing to get their army through Belgium into France, where they believe victory can be achieved. The British and French armies are fighting the Germans on the Western Front, while the Russians and Austro-Hungarians along the Balkan Front. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Turks and Bulgarians are trying to push north towards Greece and Bulgaria, but the Greeks and Romanians are holding them back. The Germans, meanwhile, are launching an offensive in the east, hoping to relieve pressure off of their western fronts. All these nations are united in an anti-German coalition, with the combined strength of Germany, Greece, and Bulgaria. They send an all-out attack on the Ottomans, leading to a swift and decisive defeat for the Turks. Meanwhile, the Germans see great success in the west, reaching the gates of Paris. It's now August 1915, and the British and French are retreating across the Spanish border, leaving behind a corridor for German forces to advance into it. It seems as though the war will soon come to an end when suddenly the Germans launch another surprise offensive in the east. This time, it's the Austrians and Russians who suffer the brunt of the attack, both suffering heavy casualties. At first, the Germans were hesitant to move on to Moscow because of its large population and strategic location. However, they decide to strike it anyway, seeing no other option if they're going to win the war. In response, the Russian government orders their citizens to evacuate the city and prepare for the imminent German attack. June 1916. The Germans have taken Moscow after a decisive battle, while the Austro-Hungarian army is forced to retreat to the Austrian border as a result of the German offensive. The eastern front has shifted westwards, allowing the Germans to retake territory. With the eastern front shifting to the west, the Russians have lost thousands of men who'd otherwise been defending the heartland of Russia. The Russians are also desperate for manpower, so they turn to Austria-Hungary and the United States of America. After receiving the request, Austria-Hungary sends an expeditionary force of roughly 20,000 troops to aid the Russians, while the United States sends a similar number of volunteers. These reinforcements allow the Russians to continue their defense against the Germans, while the Austro-Hungarians, Americans, and British are able to repel a German invasion of the British mainland. Meanwhile, the German offensive on the eastern front has stalled as they lose manpower due to supply shortages. The Germans are unable to keep up their momentum eventually, forced to pull back to a defensive position around Kiev. There they fortify their positions and wait for the next opportunity to strike. June 1917. The German offensive in the east has halted, having pushed the Russians back far enough to allow the Germans to retreat to the west, regrouping at a palace called Tannenberg. The Kaiser gathers his military staff and political advisors as they have made a new weapon, the atom bomb. They drop it on Moscow, causing the Russians to surrender. After a series of negotiations, the Allies and the Germans agree to a peace treaty. The Allied forces will leave the continent once the war ends. The terms of the Treaty of Munich are harsh. The German nation will have complete dominance over the European continent, and more.